The last two things I want to go over are, one, a little bit about the machete, and two, cutting down sapling. What I got here is my machete from Ontario Knife, which was provided by CampingSurvival.com. Check them out. They got a few different variations on the website. This one's pretty much close to a military issue, military style, with the exception of the sawback on it. Now, machetes on their own are not very sharp. As you can see, I'm not cutting my skin here. They don't come very sharp. These are pretty much meant as a blunt chopping tool, much like the axe. But a couple more safety considerations have to be made when come using the machete. One, you have a lot larger of a blade than you do with the axe. It's pretty easy to control the head of this axe to make sure it only hits what you want. But with the machete, you got a whole lot more blade to it. So that's a lot more consideration, especially when you're swinging and you're sweeping with this blade. And just like any other knives, keep that blade in front of you, stay behind this blade. You definitely don't want to be coming up to something and chopping into you. Now, like I said, this blade is dull, but the way this works, it works on blunt force, and it works on momentum. It's that momentum and that force that's going to chop it through something. A little story, back in the day when I was private speaking, and in Panama, we were digging in defensive positions in the jungle, and I was out chopping away with my machete. Never used one before, and I'm walking around, and I'm chopping, and sure enough, thumped straight into my combat boot. My 100% leather combat boot went straight in through the toe. Luckily, the blade went in between my big toe and my first toe and didn't cut any skin. But just that blunt force and that momentum was enough to cut right through my boot. If my toe was in the way, I'd be a few toes short right now. Luckily, I'm not, and luckily, I definitely learned how to use the machete properly. So keep it in mind when you're using this. You want to use sweeps out in front of you, and you want to chop away from you. Don't be holding something up, swinging wildly at your arm or at the object. You skip and glance, it's going to hit into you. Another thing you want to do is, for harder stuff, you want to come in at an angle, almost as if you're cutting down a tree. You want to come in. If you come in straight, all you're doing is chopping into the wood. You're not really chopping. You want to come in at an angle to cut those pieces out. Alright, it's going to be a lot more quicker. You're going to spend less time and less energy trying to chop stuff. Same with when you're sweeping for brush, underbrush. When you're coming in, you want to sweep up at an angle. Don't sweep down, or you're just going to knock this stuff down. And if you don't go straight in, it's going to be really difficult to cut. You're coming in at an angle, because what's happened is that momentum is making that blade hit your object at an angle, which you want to actually cut into it, instead of just smacking up against it and beating and pulverizing it. Another thing to keep in mind when you are cutting something, hold the object you're cutting. Now, I just said don't swing towards your arm, but you want to keep that in mind when you hold something, because what's going to happen is, if I'm just hitting this blindly, I'm just going to use the back end. That object is flying all over the place. Stuff fell out, hit me in the head. You also, you hit something hard enough, you could swing back, hit somebody, or hit yourself, or it can make you slip. You're putting all your momentum into something to hit it, and it bends, and you slip. You could fall, hurt yourself with your machete. Plus, if this glances off, because this is bouncing, like I said, it's not a sharp edge. It needs blunt force and momentum. It needs to hit something hard, and that object needs to be still. If it's moving around, and you hit, it can glance up. And if you are holding it, boom, glance up, hit your arm, or slip out of your hand or something else. So that's one thing to keep in mind when using the machete. You can use it a lot of times just as an axe. You can cut down a tree just like I showed you with the axe. With the machete, will take some time, but with the same principles and the same safety mechanism is in place, you can do it effectively and safely. Next thing I want to talk about is cutting down saplings. Like I said, saplings are small, flimsy, flexible. You can do it with an axe or a machete. I like to do a little bit more with the axe than the machete, because the axe, you can choke up on it and control it. When you're cutting down a sapling with an axe, you don't want to be using it by the handle like you were cutting down a tree. You got a smaller target to hit. You got this whole axe flying around, and like I said, this is going to bounce. If you got two hands on this and none on this, when you hit, that's going to bounce. Some flimsy trees can kick that axe back or make it slip, or you can lose your axe and lose control. Always keep positive control. So you're going to have positive control of that sapling. You're going to have positive control of your axe with it choked up on the handle. You're going to come in, you're going to bend down that sapling as close to the ground you can. By doing this, see how much this kicks? Now when I bring it down, there's hardly any kick to it. And it's also pushing tension on the wood, so the wood is actually crushing in itself and getting harder. It's going to be a lot easier to chop. And you can come in and just chop with your axe. Now if I try to do that with this axe without holding this tree, without bending it, it would have taken me a lot more swings. As you can see, the first swing was enough to break that wood, and then I needed a few extra chops just to cut it loose, because that tension that you put on that sapling is making all that wood harder in that spot. So when you smack it, you have more blunt force trauma, or you have more blunt force and more momentum going into that object to make it snap and make it break.